the way out that is concurrently the way in. But we talked last week about it's the way out of the doghouse and into the palace. And how do you do that? And it, it sounds so complex, and it's actually deceptively simple. In that it's a stripping down. It's a stripping down and allowing. Like if you just lived by the mantra of relax, 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 relax. Although as a woman, if somebody tells me to relax, I'll show them relaxation. But but that really is, it's, go underneath the debris, go underneath the debris, go underneath the debris, go underneath the debris. And there you find luminescence, a radiant light that's sentient and that knows. And I think all of us sense that. I've argued probably for 20 years with people who said they didn't, and then lo and behold, they did. And so I'm just going with that. But I'll start from just the basic principles. And so there's an unimaginable joy and thriving. There's a way to unleash that joy. We are in a state separated from that natural birthright, and there is an obstacle to it, tumescence, that can be identified and eradicated. And, that to me is a great promise. I actually didn't need to make it that much further from there is an unimaginable joy. I'm moved by inspiration. I want to know what's possible. I think I mentioned last week that Maslow said, Freud had done enough research on the malady and the problem, and he wanted to know the potential. And that's where I started. And by the same token, that requires a certain spiritual adulthood, because you're entering into a domain, and true spiritual work is dangerous. It's very dangerous work. It's because you're deconstructing reality as you know it. And if you don't do it with great skill and balance, you can end up in some terrible potholes. I visited most of them. Don't go there. Actually use some rigor in building the structures that will allow this power to come through in such a way that it's beneficial. But if you end up in the destructive, turn it into a lesson. That's my motto, because true work, many of us are, I saw a great video about this, this kid who was trained. They had done something with great joy, and it happened to be something that the parents considered positive. And in that moment, the parents stroked them positively. And what he was saying was that this was actually not incredibly skillful. I don't know about that, but this is his theory, in that from that point on, the child learned to do it in order to get positive external reinforcement, and not for the autotelic joy of creating and discovering and playing. And that joy, as far as I can tell, is needed throughout the journey of this self-referencing experience of discovery and what's possible. I often say the most important passion anyone can have is learning, or eudaimonia. There's a writer who wrote about the fact that Maya Angelou wrote about the fact that as a writer, she goes through the world noticing things because she has this galvanizing quality of writing. And so it wants to notice everything because everything is important, everything is precious, everything is of use. And that later she might use that in her writing. And so if you have a fundamental quality of a desire to know, a desire to learn, then everything becomes important. Nothing is inconsequential. And then when you begin to relate to things, the smallest things, as if they're of consequence, because they are, because you're absorbing them, then you begin to develop a very different, or I did, a very different relationship with reality, rather than, oh, that's just an old milk carton on the street on 125th Street that's filthy, and that's just a woman who's walking with 3 bags that look too heavy for her. But you begin to notice, and the frame begins to shift. So there's a, this joke, two fish are swimming, an old fish swims by and says, "Hey guys, how's the water?" And they look to each other, "Water? What water?" And they're so steeped in the experience that they don't realize there's any other potential. And that looks like, and that becomes reality. And I think that if there is a hindrance to accessing joy, it is mediocrity, it's acceptance of where you're at. Now, acceptance is an important part of actually moving forward, but it's resignation. That's the word, resignation for where you're at. A deep appreciation allows for the lack of resignation so that you can open the mind to begin to explore. So I thought I'd start with this quote from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I got a lot of questions. Sorry, I didn't get to answer them all online last week. I tried to answer them. I tried to send, I hope everyone got their responses. I don't know how that goes. My cat's going crazy. I have this cat that adopted me. She's just going crazy. She's like a mama. Mind itself is the clear void, all-knowing, all-aware. It is like the sky. Primal clarity, voidness, indivisible. It is the clarity of original intuitive wisdom. Just that determination is reality. The reason is that all appearance and existence is known as your mind, and the mind itself is realized, space-like in its intelligence and clarity. So I don't know that a lot of us, when we think about the mind, we think about it that way. I think especially in the West, there's this utilitarian conception of the mind, what it'll do, what it'll get for us, how it'll have us appear, as opposed to something that we're a part of. We're a part of this vast potential, this vast aliveness and space that could become anything. And that the only thing that stops us from that is keeping the aperture small. And usually when it's small, it's focused on an idea, as I mentioned last week, of the self, and what this will do for me, how I'll look, and so forth. And so to begin to shift that, the only way that I know is to begin to see other potentials that feel interesting, that feel like a discovery, that feel like a way out. So as I was thinking many years ago when I was studying, I heard the greatest turn on, and mind you, this is when I was studying orgasmic meditation, but they said the greatest turn on in the body, what illuminates the body, is the experience of learning. And that we kind of have this idea that, I'll learn and then I'll retire from learning. I'll have grasped what I needed to grasp in order to get what I want, and then I'll stop. And that's a bummer. That's and that's because learning is difficult. We have Csikszentmihalyi talks about the fact that there's pleasure. Pleasure is the experience of this return to homeostasis. So you feel a little bit agitated, and you, take a bath and you come back into that homeostatic state. At first it's a relief, but if you stay in that bath too long, it's not a relief anymore. The same is true with all things that bring us relief and bring us back to homeostasis. They have diminishing returns, whereas learning has accelerating returns. And the accelerating return, really, if you look at what corresponds with abiding happiness, and that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in for myself, for anybody who's interested in it, is the experience of becoming a more complex human being. And so what I try to do is I try to look for people who are masterful in what they do, whatever it is, who are so far beyond anything I could ever imagine being, and then to live in a kind of I just heard this term, morphic resonance, where I can tune in to where they're at and I can see the world through their eyes. And it's like a free ride. You get to hitchhike in heaven, you get to hitchhike. One time I was sitting with Philip Moffat at Spirit Rock, and I was just, I was sitting, it was probably day 7. And he walked, and I was kind of mind cranky. And he walked in, and I felt it even before he came in. I felt this warmth, like almost like warm candle wax kind of feeling. I felt this warmth. And then he walked in and he sat down, and then he just, he did his prostrations, and then he sat. And then I put my attention on him, my ambient attention, because I was being good. And suddenly it was like I was on an elevator going down, 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 further than I had ever been. And there were no walls. Either I was going to take my attention off of him, or I was going to go all the way down to where he was going. And when we settled, we didn't land. It was a groundless place where we were. But when we settled, there was this experience of just this vastness opening that I had never touched. And the reason, I would say, for me, the reason that I was able to do that is because of Om, because I know what it is to tune into another person's nervous system in such a way that I can be moved. And because of that, it's like I get to have the experiences he gets to have in my way, without that particular rigor. And then once I see what it has to offer, I can go there. And, I listen to, right now I'm obsessed with, I think I may have said this, I'm obsessed with Robert Thurman. I just came off a 7-day retreat. And he talks a lot about mandala, and that's what I want to talk about today. I'll try to talk less time. So, we have this idea that mandala, and here's an example. I thought I'd give you one. Let me see the top. Can you see that? So this is a 2D image, and it's really a spectacular thing. We have this idea that it's Eastern and distant, and that we don't have mandalas in the West. But that what they do is, first of all, they do it with all of the sand, but then they're actually building in the imagination a 3D reality. So we have this idea that we don't have mandalas, we don't live in mandalas, but it's suggested that we absolutely do. The West is a mandala. It just happens to be the mandala. Buckminster Fuller talks about the fact that it's a mandala of scarcity and lack. And from that lack, from that basic notion, the ground that the mandala is built on, a whole world develops of ways that we see and experience things. So everyone here is in a mandala where, right now it's on Zoom, located wherever you are. All of the concepts of, being in this body, in the location where you are, with trees, no trees, a room, on a planet. We have this idea that the planet is round. There's this funny quote. It's funny, in a Robert Thurman talk, where he said that somebody said to a lama, "Oh, well, the earth is round." And he said, "Well, it is now." And that's that there was enough collective imagination to begin to see it and feel it and experience it as round. But at one time it was flat, and it was on a sun disk with a lotus underneath it. And to begin to play with, I'll use that expression, to begin to play with how arbitrary our conception of reality is, requires great skill, so that you don't do like a spiritual bypass and leap out to there, but also so that you can begin to remove these threads that keep you to the very specific mandala that you're located in. And that, to my mind, is, every malady that we have is a result of this perception of confinement usually based in scarcity, that then as a result has greed, hatred, and delusion arise in order to deal with the scarcity. But our birthright, is turtles going up, turtles going down, mandalas going up, and mandalas going down with infinite beauty and majesty and jewels. One of the mandalas he talks about, and I'll let you all listen so that you're responsible for if you have the empowerments and such. But one of the mandalas that he talks about, it's made with crystal walls and adorned with jewels, with jeweled light rising up that shift and transfer who you are. So fundamentally what we're trying to do, and it sounds so remedial, but it is the work of a lifetime and many lifetimes, is to liberate the imagination, to skillfully liberate the imagination, and to have sovereignty over it, such that you can begin to design the mandala that you want to live inside of. That's the end result. But also that you can enter the pre-existing mandalas. They say when the monks are, this is so cool, when the monks are building the mandala, there's the square on the outside, the circle inside, they symbolize the flames that are protective around it, and then the light vajra ground. That what's happening is with each piece of sand they're putting down, they're actually building it in a dimension that exists right here that we can't see because we have this tumescence in front of our eyes. That all of this magic and majesty is right here, but it's like this is the ego, and here's the endless space that's available to us. And sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like this, sometimes like this, and hopefully we can move it here. We're going to keep it so that we don't end up under the supervision of a physician, but we can put it back on when necessary, so we can open the refrigerator door and take a subway and say hello to people. But that and that we can actually build this so that it's in accord with this potential, so that it's joyously removable, we'll say, and joyously you can put it back on. But they're building this mandala, and how he describes it, and maybe I'll send the link out and people can listen to this if they want. How he describes it is there is a teacher there who's seeing the mandala, and he's in the morphic field, and they're all seeing the same thing and creating it concurrently. That reality is available without substances. You have the real substances. You have the source of all substances that I think they're working with, which is emptiness. But that's available. Well, okay, so if you tell me that, and then you say, now practice, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours a day, then I'm a lot more interested in doing it, rather than this idea of, there's some suffering, and my partner broke up with me, and I can't get the job I want. That won't actually be enough fuel to get me to go. That'll be enough fuel to get me to sit for 15 minutes for sure. But it won't be enough to actually take root. And I would suggest that if you start a practice, it's, I just listened to Mike Crowley, who's also a Tibetan teacher, and he wrote a phenomenal book about the secret use of psychedelics inside of Tibetan Buddhism. And he said, in one of the sadhanas, in one of the pieces that you read, it says there's a molten ball that's dropped into the belly that will burn you if you break your vows. And that's okay. So that's also a good reason to keep your vows. So, I'm big on, start your vows lightly, and don't make too many. I'll meditate for 2 minutes a day with my little timer, and but keep it. do what you can, but do all that you can. And then what begins to happen is the positive reinforcement of space and openness comes, right? So we're located in space, and this, sometimes this stuff can sound so trippy, but it's, the idea that this life, this wall, this brick wall, this can be walked through, according to some yogis, or that it's really just a matter of how light hits the eye, and then from that an image is perceived, and then from that it's matched up to historical understandings of how to determine the meaning of that. That's basically how we construct our reality. So when I say that spiritual work is destructive, it's a matter of clearing away those prior interpretations. That's the first part. And then beginning to lightly loosen things from your interpretations of what they are, what they're for. We end up with a world of black and white based on really constrained ideas of this seamless reality, right? So I'll just say like two more parts, because I want to hear the questions this time. So then, to my mind, what we're doing is we're melting down the existing ideas. That's the first portion. You're gonna melt it down. Then you're going to be able to see. You'll be able to see, wow, this is really spectacular, this reality. And then after you see, you'll be able to enter. And there are various places that are pre-existing. Some of the mandalas that I find, and choose your mandalas carefully as well, and make sure that you have the proper guide and proper invitation. You don't want to fall into the wrong one, but always make sure you have the right guide. That's vital. If you work in some of these arenas, do it with somebody who knows how to get you out, a shaman or a teacher. But if you look at what they're doing at COSM, and COSM is Alex Gray and his wife, whose name begins with A, and I wish I Allison Gray. Thank you, Allison Gray. And they both have stunningly equal art. His has more PR around it, but hers is really phenomenal. She does. So in the 70s, right, there were LSD paper tabs, and they're tiny, and she does art on those that's just exquisite. And they're developing an entire iconography, and from that iconography, a shift in how the world can be viewed and experienced. You can go on their website, and so that's a mandala. They're creating a mandala, and my interest is developing, first of all, my own, and then developing a collective mandala that has a different ground, that has a ground of potential and joy and creativity and connection and laughter, and where those are the currency that we're trading in. And those are the expressions that you see when you enter. And you can see those depending on your own personal constitution. You can see those wherever you are. I live in Harlem. I often say, Harlem, Mongolia, and Sicily are the three heavens of the world, in that there's a rawness and a human connection and an availability and an agreement to uplift each other. The motto of Harlem is praise anyway, which I love. It's, you look out and it can look a little rough out here. They have this new drug spice that they describe as an inhale and an exhale at the same time. And that's what people look like they're doing. It looks terrible. And so you look out, and if you don't have the right eyes, then that's all you see. You don't see behind the world of appearances, where there are people who have a shared pot of joy. And when you walk out on the street, I mean, it's stunning, readily and willingly distribute it with such grace and generosity. I walk out and hey, it's my 5th time moving here. It really took me this time to get into the heart of Harlem. You want to get in the heart, and people remember you, and there's a nod in Harlem, and there's a whole feeling that we're all moving together as one. That to me is heaven. And but that's the mandala that's specifically here. And but you can't see it if you can't see it, right? So so the reason that I wanted to work with Eros, one is I think it's the most dynamic, interesting. Jim Harriet, complexity mathematician, talks about the proscenium and this idea that the most interesting material human beings can play with is love and passion and sensuality, and it's also the most potent. But the other reason I wanted to work with it is that it's the most positively incentivized way to melt down these ideas that we have and then repurpose them for creativity. It's not merely melting them down. You aren't just losing your identity in some meaningless way. You're doing it according to nature and recycling it in order to have this power that powers your vision. Your vision then becomes your attention, which is your currency, and then you can see and eventually create. And so I love this quote. This is from Cosm, and where they're talking about a different view, a different way of experiencing things. And I heard this is Eros. So, and it's from the book, I think it's V, that's due out soon, where it said, women have been lifting their skirts for centuries to ward off evil and enhance fertility, derived from a Greek word meaning to lift the skirt. Anasirma, or plural, anasirmata, is a symbolic act found in mythologies of various cultures in ancient Greece, Egypt, Persia, Ireland, Indonesia, and Japan. It is said that the evil averting gesture of women collectively exposing their genitalia has the power to shame and defeat an advancing army. I don't know about shaming them, but it is said that when Persephone, and I love this part, who was kidnapped into the underworld by Hades, her mother, Demetra, went into such mourning that life on earth began to wilt and die. If anybody's ever seen When Stella Got Her Groove Back, that's really, there are many, many expressions of that. Everyone knows the experience of life losing that vividness, that electricity, and that's really what they're speaking to. It wasn't until Baobo lifted her skirt and shocked her out of the tumescence, shocked her out of the preconceived notions of things, and shocked her into laughter. And I said last week, levity is one of the greatest things we can have on the path, that vitality and fertility were restored on earth. And fertility to me is also symbolic of creation and creativity and what keeps us alive in this autotelic sense. So I have so much more, but I do want to hear the question. So I thought what I would do is just end with this one part that I love, because we're talking about this illumination and this quality of potentially creating together. I'll do more on mandala next week because I'm obsessed. I have repurposed my obsession to learning. So now you all are going to hear about mandala until I discover the next thing. Because in the end, it's like this. Okay, this is Liz Gilbert. Centuries ago in the deserts of North Africa, people used to gather these moonlight dances of sacred dance and music that would go on for hours and hours until dawn. They were always magnificent because the dancers were professionals and they were terrific, right? But every once in a while, very rarely, something would happen. And one of these performers would actually become transcendent. And I know you know what I'm talking about because you've all seen at some point a performance like this. It was like time would stop. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about the mystical state or Eros or the erotic mind. Time would stop and the dancer would sort of step through some kind of portal. And he wasn't doing anything, or she wasn't doing anything different than he or she had ever done 1,000 nights before, but everything would align. And all of a sudden, they would no longer appear to be merely human. They would be lit from within and from below, and all lit up with the fire of divinity. And I would say the fire or illumination or radiance of emptiness or Eros. And when this happened back then, people knew it for what it was. You know, they called it by its name. And they would put their hands together and they would start to chant, Allah, 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 God, God, God. That's God, you know. Curious historical footnote. When the Moors invaded southern Spain, they took this custom with them, and the pronunciation changed over the centuries from Allah, Allah, Allah to ole, 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 which you still hear in bullfights and in flamenco dancers. In Spain, when the performer has done something impossible in magic, Allah, Allah, ole, ole, magnificent, bravo, incomprehensible. There it is, a glimpse of God, which is great because we need that. But the tricky thing comes the next morning for the dancer himself or herself or themselves, when they wake up and discover that it's Tuesday at 11 a.m. and there's no longer a glimpse of God, and they're just an aging mortal with really bad knees, and maybe they're never going to ascend to that height ever again. And I would say that's what we have practice for. The practice is to take those experiences, first to have those experiences, but then to take them and to actually digest them. As we talk about having level, which I think is coming up, that is the practice of having level, is you get to have it twice. You get to have the first experience, then you go into practice, and then you get to digest it. And in the digestion, you get to have it again. And then fundamentally, you get to share it. So you don't have that crash after touching the divine, we'll say. Okay, that's it for now. And then I'll and this is my mandala that I'm working on. So then what if instead what we did was we trained people with these eyes to see, these ears to hear, essence. So what I did was I wrote a whole vision of a reality that could exist in this imaginal world. And she's sitting on a mushroom, and that mushroom is connected to her nervous system, to the whole mycelium network of the planet, and it feeds it Eros. It comes up through the soil, grows into plants, the animals eat it, and there's a forest, there's all kinds of things. And so I work with Maya on this, Maya Gilbert, absolute stunning genius. And so we'll do a whole video of a mandala world, and maybe create a temple experience that you can go into. Those are if you saw, there's 10 faces and 10 women, and there's various implements that they're working with that can feed people fundamentally what they're hungry for. Because I feel if people are genuinely fed what they're looking for, and sometimes if they're fed emptiness, if they're fed sweetness, if they're fed darkness, whatever it is, they become that ole being. They become the realization in itself. So there we go.
All right. Wow. Thank you so much, Nicole. What a beautiful talk. Okay, and then now we have some time for questions from the audience. So please submit your question in the chat box and I'll call on you. Due to the timing, we'll only be able to get to a few, but Nicole will be answering some questions offline that we'll send you. So let's see, we'll go ahead and start with Austin. Hi, Austin.
Hi, that was very refreshing. Thank you so much for, just opening up that window into your world. And my question, which slightly modified, I think, from your talk, was how do I sustainably grow my attention wider to be able to absorb more of what is happening in my life with a skillful hand?
Are you inspired? Is there anything inspiring you right now?
Yeah, I think the the opportunity to kind of touch on to grow more of a foundation at the one hand, and then to kind of go into more kind of grow my perception of how to touch into more of the work that we work with, and be able to kind of I don't know, round out the way that I can work with it more, like have a bigger palette or something in the way that I can speak about it. And yeah, I think just hearing you talk was inspiring, and then being able to kind of touch into that for myself and be able to express it more, probably.
Okay. So I'll tell you what I do. I don't, and these are, so I do believe that good is the enemy of great. And probably especially as a woman, but also as a somewhat precision practitioner, which is where I think we meet, there's a precision, inspiration and desire and vision can get quashed in wanting to be good, or duty, or obligation, or doing the right thing. And then what happens is it's almost just like a grueling going through while trying to have a big smile because you're told to be joyous as a spiritual practitioner. And that was a good 10 years of my practice of just, oh my gosh, like drawing from coffers that had no fuel and thinking that made me a good person. I mean, there's the story of the Buddha where finally he had deprived, and then finally he ate the grain of rice and said, wait a minute, this is actually the way. And so I'm very deliberate about cultivating my joy and vision. And nightly I do two things. Well, I do a lot of things, but two of the things that I do is I write visions of how I would like to see things. Like that's how we came up with the unconditional freedom program, or I live in Harlem, and there's a way that I just went for this walk. That's why it's so fresh in my mind. There's a way that I'm fairly clear that there's dehydration here. People need water. And so I was walking and I was visioning how to have, really kind of majestic ways to access water rather than plastic bottles that would, but to have it have this quality, there's a certain quality that I personally curate for. And what I curate for is a saturation. Like I like really vivid saturation, electric, alive, and with the tinge of, that feeling when you're ole, with a tinge of something so awe-inspiring. And so anything that I do, I want that to be my signature. So tonight, what I'll do is I'll begin to write from that. How would I like to see water in Harlem, and various other things too. I write it for my own life. How, there's a sense that I really want to go into the mandala work, and I want to begin to be a reality programmer. I don't even know what that means. So I'll begin to write it out and create it and then live into it. So that's the first thing I do. And the second thing that I do is I take anxious things like, we'll just say I have to do I'm getting plane tickets, right? And so that kind of thing makes me anxious, and it'll stay in my mind and churn. And so I'll write the best outcome of that just to release it into somewhere and positively. So, I got my tickets, I got them on time. The flight was seamless. I was able to listen to the podcast I want to listen to, or whatever it is. And so I'm working both sides of the mind, because otherwise the anxious side will hijack it and make you good.
Right. Thanks. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Austin. And the next question is coming from Cherry. Hi, Cherry.
Hi guys. I am driving, but yeah. So the idea of place as heaven. So you mentioned three different places: Harlem, Sicily, and I forget the third. But
Mongolia.
yes. And so my question is: would then would would an enlightened person be able to have that any place be heaven? And if so, I mean, like, yeah, like how, like that kind of blows my mind, I guess. And if not, do you need, does a place have to be, do you have to be in vibration with a place? So like if you're living in a place and you're just like miserable or whatever, and you're trying really hard to, to make it heaven, but it's not happening. Where's the disconnect? What can I do as a person to bridge that gap?
That's a great question. So I think yes. I think yes to all of it.
Okay.
And I do think, I think resonance, I believe in karma. I think resonance is important. And there is, when you go sit in the Padmasambhava cave, or you go to the Vajrayogini temple, or you go to the great Catholic churches in Italy, there's a vibration and a frequency that transmits and uplifts invisibly. And so I do believe there are places on the planet that feed us different things. And I do believe, and this is, unconditional freedom, you'll hear me say it a lot. And unconditional freedom really is the capacity to see all places as heaven. Then there's something else that's required, right? And that's when I did, I did my unconditional experiment. The whole idea was to liberate my sexuality so that I wasn't looking to anyone else to give me turn on, but so that I could liberate it and bring it wherever I am, to have it be that there was like a set of 3D glasses that was a little bit in love with everything. And if I go to Fresno, I don't know if anybody lives in Fresno, but when I'm growing up in California, Fresno was not my idea of heaven. And, it was, dry and, I don't know, what do you call that? Clapboard walls. And it wasn't steeped in beauty. And so how do I begin to see this is beautiful? And that's, I do the one green leaf. If there's one green leaf, then whatever it is can be beautiful. And, when I go to Fresno, I love to drive. So when I go up and down the coast and I'm in Fresno, there's a Mexican restaurant that has the most exquisite Mexican food, but the people who are inside of that restaurant emanate this love. There's just this joy and this love. And so I find the location inside of it where I can tune in to the best part of it. And then that begins to feed the vision. It's all a matter of vision. We use the term turned on, which sounds so cheesy, but turned on means literally lit up, illumined from within, so that the light is so pouring out of you that everything is beautiful. So I go to a location, I'll find where the turn on is, and then I'll allow that lighting to happen. And then suddenly I begin to notice, oh, wow, that's so neat. The people in Fresno have this kind of familial connection that wasn't, I'm an only child, that I didn't have. And there are people who've moved here from other places and so deeply appreciate being here. And I can begin to see things I couldn't have otherwise seen.
Well, perfect. Thank you. That's beautiful. So it begins with me seeking the turn on within myself, as well as the connection with the place. Is what I'm getting.
Yeah. I mean, I start by steeping in places that have it naturally for like Mongolia. When I got back from Mongolia, it was, you should all know, it was a rough day the day after. But I walked in so pouring out light that I was walking in my own my own light that was pouring through me, that everything was incredible. And that's really what psychedelics do. They remove the part of the mind that's judging so that you can see what actually exists. That's all you're doing. You aren't like making anything happen. You're allowing it to happen.
Beautiful. Thank you, Cherry.
Thank you.
And then we have time for one more question from Sama. Hi, Sama.
Hello.
Hi.
I am in the land, and I am in the tent. It's really nice to start my day here, listening to you. I feel so inspired. And my question is around starting this idea, like living in a female body and coming up with a new way of living and a new way of being. What are the blessings and the obstacles that you faced for you to really come out and prove that? I'm starting my own business, and I'm just like, I want to hear your journey and how you just keep shining and moving forward.
We'll see. I mean, I'm moved by your question. I want to answer it honestly. I mean, in a funny way, I think it's a whole Zoom. I'm reading a great book I would suggest anybody read called The Red Thread by Susan Murphy. And it's the red thread of Zen, but there aren't a lot of places that I see these questions skillfully addressed in my mind, because what happens is you can't build a world using other people's metrics. So there's this, Obama said that Hillary had to do everything he had to do, only do it in heels, right? And so there's a way that what I have to do, and I have a list of questions that I ask anything that tells me it's true, is, first of all, is it true? Is it wholly true? Is it true over time and over space? But then, is it true for me as a woman? And I can tell you that that eliminates a lot of things that suggest that they're true, because it ends up being very upside down. Another really challenging part is you can't create against, you can only create for. And there's often, I come from a world of women's studies. I taught women's studies. And there's an idea that we're going to separate and show them. And in my mind, the them we're showing, whatever they're experiencing, is a deficiency of what we have to offer. It's actually incumbent upon me. It's my spiritual duty to bring forth the unique feminine that's missing from the world, because everything we see, greed, hatred, and delusion, is a result of its absence. It's the only thing that can subdue greed, hatred, and delusion. I don't think you can conquer them, and that's been a terrible misconception. So I think it's been harrowing, I can tell you that, but I signed up for that. And the most harrowing part usually is having it. I mean, you guys, if you've seen the sutras, like, they're very complex and very, I would say, sophisticated and well thought out and organized. And I think in math, and then to be invisible, because the language that I speak is not understood by most people, and how slow and glacial it is to begin to introduce another idea without getting angry. And, to be dismissed. I often tell the story of 20 years in science labs telling researchers we had some groundbreaking material. And it wasn't until Vivian, oh my God, I want to cry when I think about her. I think that's true. And then Nikki, and then, that this knot inside of me of knowing something true that couldn't be received yet. So the most important part in bringing forward the feminine, and also that it's seen as inherently evil. This is a great part that she talks about in the red thread, is that because we don't understand the feminine, it's seen as evil, and it's seen as taking men off of their course, right? So that's why nuns aren't allowed in, I'm not going there, but so you're trying to bring medicine, and the medicine is automatically rejected, and you're holding this gift and you're watching unnecessary suffering, and at the same time you have to teach the language that can begin to understand that it's medicine. So that's the most challenging part. The most beautiful part, though, is when, you know, I'm on a call with a woman like you who asks a question like that, and in the face of all that we see, because we aren't ignorant, all that we see about how impossible it is, how difficult it is, how misunderstood it is, that how if you stand up, you get shot, you know, what you're the cauldron that you're putting yourself into when you do it, that there are still women and men. You know, there are a lot of men behind me who fortified me in being here, who say, no, I can't slip into defeatism. I can't slip into resignation, and the journey that takes you through, because that's the journey that you're actually, it's a spiritual journey to see opposition and not slip into those things, to not say, forget it, because you're so called, because, you know, in Tibetan Buddhism, it's called a bodhisattva, but you're so called to bring healing that you would be going against your own laws and your own nature were you to do that, no matter what it looks like out here. And it's difficult, but there is enough salve at every turn. Now, that has been the most beautiful thing that I have found, is right when yeah, I'm dying, I'm not resigned, but I'm dead, you know, then all of a sudden there's, you know, a beautiful sister who says, look, I only have, you know, 2 cents of fuel left in my tank, but I have enough to get us to the next place, and that we're moving bit by bit. And I think that's how it'll happen. I think that's naturally how the feminine happens. And then pretty soon there'll be a wildfire. A purifying wildfire, not like the California wildfires. And I think it'll move away all of the old ideas. And then the beautiful truth, not the oppositional truth, not the outraged truth, the beautiful truth of what the feminine brings. And that is an invisible radiance that transforms everything on its path without having to speak. And that is my definition of power. It's like gravity. It moves everything in a way that naturally uplifts. So that's my basic feeling on it.
Thanks so much. My heart is beating so fast. And I know when the heart beats so fast, it means I need to voice it. Oh, I'm an activist myself. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I changed the law where women right now are traveling without male permission, and it was not easy to stand up. And I thought I was done, but right now there are new voices that's coming into my head that I need to go to a specific direction, and I need to be way louder. It's not only about Saudi women. It's not only about women. It's about the feminine energy. It's about bringing that into life and have people enjoy pleasure, because we do that very well. So I just want to say that I love you. Thank you so much for coming into my life, into my journey with your own with your orgasmic meditation. Thank you for helping me be more free and fall in love with myself more. I appreciate you. And I want to introduce Jeff, the one who brought me here. He's a man and he's very fully supportive. So
thank you, Jeff. You have brought us a great gift on this call, and you're a great gift too. And I want to say, you know, this often can seem like it, because I'm lone face on your screen and you're talking to me. It is an honor and a privilege to meet you and to feel the courage that you're moving through the world with, and what you're addressing and what you're facing and what you're willing to voice. And I'll tell you, the most important part is that when you voiced it with love. And I know how hard it is to not have bitterness in your heart when you've been in those knots. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samaj.
Thanks,
Wow,
Jeff.
what a beautiful, beautiful Sutra study. And that is all the time we have. I know that we are over a little bit, but we will have time to just do 2 really quick reflections, because reflections are like the frames at the end of an Om. And if we don't do them, it'll feel like we walked away without having done the Om. So 2 quick reflections. Go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you. Leah.
Hi, Nicole, and everyone, Sama, everyone who shared. I'm so touched, and I really felt the mandala come into existence. You know, like I felt we were all creating the mandala that we wanted to live in together, and I really appreciate you bringing that in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. And then Vanessa, close us out.
Thank you. Hi, Nicole. There was a moment where you were describing mandala and describing that you go to see things, and you do this like open-eyed look up, and when you do it, I feel like you send it to me. I go from kind of being confused maybe to like knowing it in my bones already, and it's just beautiful. And it happened several times on this call. You're so generous with that sending, like getting us all on the same page in our bones. I love you so much.
I love you. I'm doing my best. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, I want to send out the podcast. Robert Thurman is, if anybody knows, he's a genius. So Robert Thurman, Lama Glenn Mullen, and Changwal, Drupal Changwal, all 3 have had really profound effects on my understanding of mandala. I'm not an expert. What I do is I go into worlds and I come back and describe what I see and then point how to get there. And so I just want to make sure if anybody is interested in those things that I'm pointing to there, because I just know my little mushroom lady mandala, but there are some really, really stunningly sophisticated versions that you can get. So I'll make sure that they have all of the links, and then anybody who wants those, you can get those as well.
Yes. Thank you, Nicole. We'll make sure to send those out to those of you who are on the call. Well, that wraps up our call. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I want to put a plug in there really quickly that if you have not gotten your copy of the Principles Sutra, you can get it on Amazon now. It is one of the number 1 national bestseller on Amazon. So,
and I want to say thank you. I mean, let me just say, I'm sorry I'm going so long, but you guys need to know this is just my weird little program of the world that I have seen, and it just went into this book, and then they sent me that it was, it was number 1, and I mean, it's anyway. Thank you. I know from whence my joy comes. And so we did not expect anything. This was the throwaway book that I wrote to empty my mind so that I could write the books that I thought people would understand and be interested in. And that this is doing what it's doing is just such a tremendous, tremendous gift. And that's you. That is clearly you. Thank you. Okay. That's my thing.
Thank you. The link is on the chat box. All right, everyone, we will see you next week as we continue with Nicole on Sutra Study. See you all then. Same time, same place. Bye-bye. Love you guys.
Bye.